the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom. The National Air Traffic Services has apologised after a technical issue yesterday led to cancellations and delays. Investigations are ongoing into UK flight disruption that has left thousands of passengers stranded. Analysis of flight data shows at least 281 flights have been cancelled today at the UK's 6th busiest airports, with Gatwick and Heathrow worst hit. NAT's chief executive says the problem had been identified and that flight data it received saw primary and backup systems suspending automatic processing. Passengers have been warned to expect knock-on disruption in the coming days. A police officer who was hit by a train last week has died. 46-year-old Sergeant Graham Saville was trying to save a distressed man on the railway tracks in Balderton. Flags across the Nottinghamshire police force will now be flown at half-mast as a mark of respect. The Prime Minister has said it's a testament to his bravery that he died in the line of duty and a terrible reminder of the work the police do every day to keep us safe. In other news, the Mayor of London says he's sorry for anyone who's suffering adverse consequences because of his policies. Speaking to GB News, Sadiq Khan said the expanded ULEZ policy is essential to protect the health of people living in the capital.
Listen, I'm always sorry for anybody who's suffering adverse consequences because of our policies, but at the same time, I've got to be honest with people and say I've been meeting bereaved mums who's lost their children because of air pollution. I've been meeting a paediatrician today who works with mums who are pregnant, suffering the ill consequences because of air pollution, and babies who are born suffering the ill consequences. I've met today a doctor who runs an asthma clinic, but also I've visited Great Ormond Street, the inpatient ward at the Children's Evelina Hospital. I met scientists, health practitioners and others. That's why I'm angry that the government's letting down London and the South East.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the Mayor's decision is in poor taste.
People and families are struggling with the cost of living. That's obvious to everyone. And at that time, the Labour Party, the Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer are introducing the ULEZ charge, which is going to hit working families. I don't think that's the right priority. I don't think that's the right thing to do, and I wish they had not done it.
And finally, GB News can reveal at least 20,000 people have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Official Home Office figures show that up until yesterday, 19,800 migrants had arrived in small boats. However, GB sources reveal up to 300 migrants being brought into Dover Harbour on border force vessels today brings that total past 20,000. It's understood they crossed the Channel in at least 6 dinghies. That comes as the government insists its Stop the Boats policy is working. You're with GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's time for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, we have two top comedians, Louis Schaefer and Steve N. Allen. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Welcome back.
Thank you very much for keeping your surface clutter to a minimum so far, Louis.
I didn't. I'm going to bring this out in the third quarter.
We would appreciate it if you did keep it. For that, we'll need that little uptick.
I'm doing it for you because I know how.
At 11:45, people's patience is beginning to get threadbare. That's exactly the little pep they need. So let's take a look at the front pages. The Daily Mail kick us off. Not a penny to compensate air chaos victims, and time to get Khan out, say the ULEZ rebels. Metro, £80 million bill for air IT fiasco. Guardian, Britain must take China's human rights abuses seriously, say MPs. The Express, Prime Minister, our Brexit freedoms will ditch EU rule to build homes. The News, UK airlines accused of abandoning passengers. And finally, the Daily Star, terrible news, boffins say beer goggles don't work. So those were your front pages. So we will kick off with the Daily Mail, Lewis.
Well, this is bad news for people who actually have a life. Is not a penny to compensate air chaos victims, and it basically there was a glitch in the system a couple of days ago, and there's a knock-on effect, and 281 flights were canceled yesterday, and that's a lot of flights. And every time you have one flight canceled, that's another flight that gets canceled. There's another flight that gets canceled. Yeah. And people...
And they're not going to pay anything back. They're saying it's a French blunder. I'm not quite clear what the blunder is. A blunder is a very thick word, isn't it, for something like this?
Yeah, with it being IT-related, my money was on Windows updates.
Yeah.
Because they come when you don't want them, and you've just got to get something sent in the next 5 minutes, and then it starts refreshing.
Yes.
And it's on 0% for way longer than it mathematically should
This was what we all expected with Y2K, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and it just happened a few years later. And the reason you can't get any compensation, though, is because it's caused by so-called extraordinary circumstances.
Is that like act of God? Is that the new version?
But if there's one thing you probably should take out insurance against if you're an airline, would be extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
The ordinary ones, you're probably good at.
I suppose they always give you the option probably to pay an extra couple of quid and get your journey insured, possibly. I don't know. You get that on rail. My rail journey back from Edinburgh was delayed by about 45 minutes. And I was compensated by about 50% on the way back, which, if I could have scaled that up, I could do that for a living. I earned more in 45 minutes than I generally do. So, I don't know. But I feel like maybe people should insure their own, I don't know. You can probably do that, right? You can insure your own flight.
Well, you could. I think they do. And I think that, but there's also the insurance. They have insurance, their thing, and they have rules and regulations that say if you miss the flight, then they should put you in a hotel and they should make a thing. I blame the Chinese, because we're always blaming the Chinese.
Moving on to The Guardian, Steve, what have we got there?
Chinese, time to blame the Chinese. Britain must take China's human rights abuses seriously, says MPs, and they're right. And some of the ways that China's been acting is a threat to security, and they're right. And all of the things you read in this, they're right. Will anything happen? Nah. This is all words and no actual being brave enough to stand up to China.
What would that involve? Like limiting imports?
Probably, and I don't think we'd win that fight.
No,
I mean... buy a lot of their stuff.
I do that in the space of half an hour. Badmouth the Chinese on WhatsApp and then go to Amazon and buy something I don't need that's made in China. I mean, if they just put a significant badge on everything, if they forced you to say, a bit like when you count calories, you know, the traffic light system, you know.
Yeah.
This purchase will support a regime with which you have expressed.
Or a picture of a spy balloon on the side of whatever you're buying. Just
but across the world, this is happening. We're going to be discussing things that happen in Uganda and in Saudi Arabia. It's happening. We can't control the world. And what if they come after us, Simon?
Yes.
And they just start saying, oh, what you're doing in the Tavistock Centre goes against our thing. What if they tells us the way we're treating migrants?
I think they quite like what we do in the Tavistock Centre, don't they?
All right, I just used it as an example.
No, I know, but I said, you know, sterilising our children is one of those things that probably plays right into China's agenda, I would imagine.
They don't like us having Winnie the Pooh films.
No, that's true.
That is something they
think that's like a what do you call it, a dog whistle about their leader, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because apparently he looks like Winnie the Pooh, and also doesn't wear anything on the lower half.
And then, you know, Saudi didn't like Winnie the Pooh either. No, that was Mohammed the Bear, wasn't it? A few years ago. Do you remember that? I got confused. Mohammed the Pooh, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, let's take a look at the front page of the Express, Lewis.
PM, which means Prime Minister, this is for people out there who may not know, our Brexit freedoms will ditch EU rule to build homes. And I know everyone goes, oh, we got to build homes. Like it'll actually, like it would help the housing crisis. Of course it won't help. It won't help. It'll just keep on destroying the country. The only people who benefit from building houses are Rishi Sunak's class of people.
So you don't think there's a housing shortage? Do you think that's a sort of misplaced
Yeah, there's housing shortage when you're letting 1 million people in every year and say there's a housing shortage. First you do the easy things. You don't let 1 million people into the country.
So gunboats in the Channel, and then you start thinking about housing crisis.
You know what? Maybe maybe a wall, build a wall right in the middle of the channel. But yeah, I mean, actually, the people who it's everything about this country is about getting them to the best thing. I'm going to say this. The best thing about this country is the green belt. And when I came to this country, I came from New York, and we have to drive hours to get out of town, hours to see a little bit of green, because it's just been urban sprawl. And it
doesn't have to be around London, though, the building. I mean, a lot of it's in Norfolk, for instance. They could fill up. I think they should draw a triangle. I seriously do, about Cambridge, Ipswich, Norwich, depending on which way that is being looked at. And then fill that with... make Silicon Fen like a massive, you know, expansion of...
And do you think that'll help?
Yeah.
Do you think that, you know what, they did that back in the 1950s when they built new towns. And did it help at all? It doesn't help. The thing...
But it doesn't end the problem. I mean, nothing has ever ended the problem, has it? It's an ongoing situation.
Because we don't need to have growth.
I am dubious, though, that this is, you know, tearing up Brussels red tape, triggered by Brexit. The Express is the only paper now, isn't it, that continues to try and... Do you have any sort of...
Well, there's a couple of things in this. Even on the front page, it says that we'll now be able to have developments near waterways. And just a quick check on how our water's doing.
Yeah.
It's full of turds.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't want to build.
Flooding, excuse me, Steve, and flooding. And then they say, oh my God, it's climate change. It's like those buildings that they built up there. Remember when they had the huge flood up in Cumbria?
I can't imagine why you think there's going to be flooding in somewhere called Silicon Fen. This seems an extraordinarily pessimistic view. Why can we not build houses on pontoons? That would work, so they can just rise with the coming tides. Listen, the Dutch, most of Holland is reclaimed, isn't it? We know that, and they have the world's greatest, most profitable agricultural sector, all of which is on reclaimed land, which didn't exist 100 years ago.
That is also a lie.
That is what we should be. When we should look at East Anglia, we should reclaim it.
Yeah, reclaim it. First of all, not one bit of Holland is reclaimed. It was claimed. It's claimed from the sea. It wasn't like it was land, and then suddenly they got to remake it.
There's a rather pedantic, semantic point, but the point stands that they made land where previously there was none. I mean, we've done that in the Docklands, but we could do more of it, I think. Every time a hotel falls off Scarborough, we need a couple of thousand new acres, you know, in the wash.
You know what, Simon? I'm so against it completely. I'm so against it. I think it's so evil because it's one of those things that say we're doing good, but at the same time,
it's too easy to say we don't need growth. That's like saying, you know, things were better in the olden days, and let's all remember the sweets we had.
Try and keep the lunacy for the final third. Boffins, Steve, Daily Star.
Sorry, some more lunacy because it's the Daily Star. They've looked into it, and beer goggles don't work. So this is, in case you don't know, when you enjoy alcohol, the theory was it made you find ugly people more attractive.
Yeah.
Whereas it turns out drinking alcohol just simply lowers your own standards. Your eyes are fine. It's the other parts of you that think, why not?
But that suggests that the goggles were working on the eyes. The goggles, I mean, just the fact that they are beer goggles doesn't necessarily mean that your eyes are the part that's being... Does it? Do you think so?
I took that from the name, the beer goggles. That
it's just a mechanism that makes you find other people more attractive because you're looking through the bottom of a glass. But it doesn't matter which part of the, you know, how far deep the optical nerve goes straight to the brain.
But if you then give drunken people all these pictures and say, you know, order them in ugliness, they can spot.
Oh, they still are able... Yes, OK. So basically you've just lowered your standards, right? Yes, of course.
So I always start the evening with low standards. Saves time.
I think there's quite an interesting correlation between drinking and risk-taking as well, isn't there, I suppose? Because people do risky things when they're drunk, right? They do things that are bad, like even just like eating a kebab from a van or whatever.
Well, there's a scientific reason for that, is because alcohol, which is fermented sugar, releases uric acid, and uric acid it tells the body, hey, wintertime is coming, you better do something risky to make sure we got enough food stored.
Okay.
So
that was a collect underpants brackets world domination. Kind of leave them
no, uric acid is kind of amazing. You could look up Dr. Richard Johnson out of the University of Colorado.
That's a made-up name, isn't it? If ever I was coming up with a made-up name, Richard Johnson.
Dick Johnson.
Well, they call him Rick. They do call him Rick.
You're Rick. But that's it for part one. Believe me, join us in part two for nuclear weapons, multiple carnival stabbings and alcohol-related deaths in Scotland, all given our trademark comedy spin, I assure you. See you in a couple of minutes.
Did they fall for that?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Louis Schaefer and Steve N. Allen. So, Louis, The Guardian has uncovered plans to revive Suffolk's strategic role in the next World War, it seems.
Well, this is where you want to put the housing,
yes.
Simon. Airbase project could pave way for U.S. to host nuclear weapons. You're thinking, okay, they're definitely going to host nuclear weapons. No, it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons, maybe. But what's happening is that because the United States is spending £50 million to build a 144-bed dormitory at RAF, that's going to give Americans 140 44 people there.
It's the use of a term which apparently has been used in previous documents, is always a bit of a sign. It's called potential surety mission. And the suggestion is that these people will be in there to supervise the nuclear weapons when they arrive.
When they arrive.
So maybe, I mean, I don't know. Is that a way? Is there kind of like an architectural dog whistle? I don't know.
It's one of those camp things, which I call it. Could, maybe, possibly. I mean, it is the Guardian, and they're against nuclear weapons.
I was interested to see the CND have got involved, Steve.
Yes,
I hadn't heard that name for a while.
Yeah, they've got a Google alert ready for anything like this. Surety, we're back on the game.
Green and common.
Yeah, why not just put them on a boat? You don't need to build things. Have a BB Stockholm. I think it's still not being used. We could have just sailed it around.
Yeah.
But the rule is, in general, we never know where nuclear weapons are stored. That makes good sense, because what you don't want is people turning up there, blowing them up and things. So we're never really going to find out whether this is just a hint that it's happening. We had them before, apparently, these B-61 bombs, but then they were decommissioned, that they were considered to be obsolete, and then they upgraded them.
Yeah.
And so anyone who's a little bit, friends of the earth, that's recycling and reusing.
Absolutely. I like the fact that they call them in this article 100 B-61 gravity bombs. This is what you call bombs now. They're gravity bombs. I suppose I distinguish them from a missile, but still, nobody ever calls any kind of bomb. I mean, that's a bomb, isn't it?
It's a tautologist.
No, it's not a tautology. It's a redundancy.
It's a redundancy.
It's an extra word, gravity bomb.
Well, I suppose you can have a bomb that doesn't drop.
No, that's a missile.
That is
true.
true.
No, not one that flies either. Just in the old days, you put it in a bin and make a phone call.
Oh, you mean like Goldfinger or whatever?
Anyway, I've got to say, I like the idea of Americans having nuclear capability in Suffolk. It's got a bit of a nostalgic ring. I mean, that was a lot of airfields there in the Second World War, right? That's Jimmy Stewart and people like that used to fly in the flying fortresses and the big chunky jackets.
Can I get more stockings?
Yeah, rock and roll and Spinal Tap and all that kind of stuff.
And your mother got chocolate bars.
Yeah, exactly. I think those were the good old days in hindsight. Steve, mostly peaceful news now in the Times as the police focus unhelpfully on the stabbings rather than the vibrancy at Notting Hill Carnival.
It's one way to look at it. Yeah, Notting Hill Carnival stabbings highest in years. Stabbings at the Notting Hill Carnival reached the highest level in 7 years as violence, sexual offences and assault on police. I think we need a bit of context, though. Let's say that's bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's bad. When bad things happen, that is a bad thing. But we also need the context of 2 million people turned up to this. That's 10 Glastonbury.
Did they, though? Really?
Well,
I don't believe it. That's a quarter of London in Notting Hill. It just doesn't make any sense to me, that.
2.5 million people use the tube every day in London.
Yeah, but that's the whole of London.
But, only in thin tubes across it.
They throw this number around. I mean, I would love to know if it was true. I came through Paddington Station, which is not far away, yesterday to get here at about 6 o'clock in the evening. There was obviously a little bit of extra, Notting Hill traffic. You could tell the kind of people. But it didn't feel to me like I was on the edge of a 2 million member. Do you know what I mean? I just don't get it. I mean, my gut just tells me they're lying. I'm saying they're lying, yeah.
Are you saying they're lying?
I'm saying they're lying. And because they try and throw this stuff around. There's some people go, oh, it's, per capita, it's the same number of stabbings as you would expect in Liverpool over the course of a couple of days or whatever. That has the same population and it has the same number. I'm like, just not being serious. If you walk through Notting Hill during Carnival, are you seriously trying to tell me you don't feel any more danger? Yes, of course. Are you seriously trying to tell me you don't feel that you don't feel any more threatened than you do walking through Liverpool on average? Of course it is. It's vastly more dangerous. There are people waving machetes around caught on camera.
In Liverpool or on the
in Notting Hill, and it's just I just don't know how we're in this ridiculous denial that it's obviously an extraordinarily crime-intense activity.
Even without the numbers, you could look at the fact that clearly there's tension as well. This is very much the carnival when there is tension with the police presence.
Yeah.
But how do you fix this? Because it's not like you can fix it through community outreach, because Suella would shut that down. I don't know what steps could be taken to make this not an area of friction. And I think maybe that might be something that you feel... Maybe it's just you, Simon. When you walk through Notting Hill Carnival...
I haven't been there for many years, but I used to go in the 1980s and 90s. It was already pretty fraught with danger. You could sense it in the atmosphere there.
But even if it was only
it's not like Glastonbury.
Even if it was only 1 million people, and let's say it is dangerous, but the people do like it, and the people who are complaining are probably the rich, posh people like you who move into those houses.
The people complaining are the police who get stabbed and sexually assaulted. They seem to be the ones who are complaining.
How does a policeman get sexually assaulted?
Right, OK.
I don't think all police officers are men.
We'll clip that one for the socials. Booze news in the Telegraph now, Lewis. And Scots have defied pricing policy to assert their primacy in alcohol-related deaths.
It doesn't seem like that many. 1,276 people died last year of alcohol. Most of them are men, but still a lot of them are women, and which is 31 more than the year before. And Scotland is saying, yeah, but if we didn't have this pricing strategy, we'd have a lot more, which has reminded me very similarly of what they said about COVID.
Yeah.
They said, you know, nobody's dying, but
yeah.
people would have died if we hadn't done what we supposed to do.
It is quite interesting to me that it's gone up significantly, but it's only gone up for women. The number of men dying is exactly the same, and still more than the women, but the women have defied the pricing, whereas the men have ignored it, I suppose. But
I hadn't added the price in because I thought it was just this sex-based issue of historically through the 90s and onwards, women have been catching up with the men in terms of certain behaviours, including drinking. And I think you're going to have to wait a couple of decades until it kills you. And I thought maybe that's what we're seeing now. I hadn't thought about the fact that maybe they were just spending their husband's money.
No, you're probably right. I mean, I suppose alcohol-related deaths are, generally speaking, chronic illnesses rather than people getting drunk and killing themselves in accidents. But it does seem that, I mean, I don't know at what point they do expect this to have affected behaviours, but there's been no evidence so far that it's had any significant improvement.
No, 31. There were 31 studies that said there was either no improvement or they couldn't tell if there was an improvement.
I mean, I think it's hard to know quite what would happen, but I would suspect, obviously, Edinburgh and Glasgow are probably, you know, further south. You can get across the border. You know, there's going to be access to. I don't exactly call it, like duty-free, essentially. Do you know what I mean?
England,
like
coming
into England, where the same measures are not taking place, or little workarounds. I mean, alcoholics are notoriously cunning, you know, when it comes to getting to their fix, as indeed are all drug addicts.
And I have a question, which is, how can they tell who died of alcohol, of alcohol-related things? Because if most of the population is drinking, and such a large percentage of the population have fatty liver diseases or diabetes, or cancer. These are diseases they could have died of cancer.
But those are the ones that you wouldn't know. But when on the death certificate the cause of death is cirrhosis of the liver, and the doctor has said it's caused by drinking, because it's not the first time the doctor would have seen these people. The GP would know if someone's got a drinking problem.
I think so.
You can short.
And unless they've changed the criteria by which they judge it, then you kind of go, well, whatever criteria they're using here, then they're still using the same criteria here, and it's gone up. So I think I mean, I get what you mean. It's rarely, alcohol abuse is rarely in isolation from an otherwise excellent diet and a good fitness regime. Anyway, better health news, Steve. The Telegraph have cancer treatments getting quicker, less invasive.
Yeah, it's kind of good news, but let me be the first to poo-poo it.
OK.
So NHS cancer patients receive a jab instead of an hour-long infusion. It's 75% quicker, which already makes you think, oh, we're not talking about a jab next.
No.
It's a 7-minute jab.
Okay.
And great, that's quicker than something that could take around an hour. It goes under the skin rather than directly into a vein.
Yeah.
But this drug's been around already. We know how the drug works. None of this is new other than the delivery system. Right. And I don't want to be miserable, but I don't think the problem this country has with cancer is caused by those 53 minutes.
No. Fair enough.
So it's not going to.
Although it may be if they can see that many. It depends whether they've got to cure people outside the hospital, I suppose. I don't know.
But again, it doesn't seem like we would have heard that if this were the only bottleneck in our cancer treatment, in the story of a cancer patient, we would have heard about it by now.
There is a thing, and I don't know whether this applies in this case, but there is a thing whereby patients report certain degrees of satisfaction or dissatisfaction with procedures, and there are ways of making them feel better about them afterwards, which aren't necessarily, you know, particularly relevant to the actual delivery system of the. Do you know what I mean? Like, for instance, if you just make the last 5 minutes of a procedure quite comfortable and pleasant, they go away thinking of it as having been quite pleasant, even if that last 5 minutes was utterly irrelevant, and they could have dispensed with it altogether.
So this 7-minute injection might be like 2 minutes of good injection.
Exactly. What I mean is, I don't know whether it's word of mouth, but I think there is a kind of tendency. A lot of people just don't go to the doctors because they think it's going to be a miserable business, rather. You know, and I think maybe if you think all I'm going to get is a little, you know, subcutaneous. You know, that's probably I can bear that. You know, a lot of people don't fancy IV.
Can I be the second to poo-poo it? He was the first one to poo-poo it. I'm going to poo-poo it in a major way. First of all, the median survival rate of people who take this injection is 10.3 months.
Yeah.
So You're going to live, and if you don't take it and you do the chemotherapy, it's 9 months, 9.2. So basically, you get an extra month of living, but you are being tortured because you are taking either chemotherapy or this other kind of drug.
Well, I suppose if you've only got that many months left to live, those 53 minutes are...
They might matter.
And here's the other thing.
No, we've got to move on. Sorry, Daily Mail now, Lewis. And first it was Elvis, now it's Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is alive and well.
He might have died of cancer in the plane. Who knows what happened? 53-minute flight. Is this guy, Yevgeny Prigozhin, he's alive and plotting his revenge on Putin after a body double was killed in a plane assassination plot. This is some Russian analyst says this. Personally, I would not believe anything nothing personal against the Russians. They're lovely people, but you can't believe anything that an analyst would say, a Russian would say.
But that means you can't believe, by that sound, you can't believe what Putin was saying either, right?
You can't believe anything that anything would say. It's basically, it's a long, as they said, it might have been a body double and the guy is still alive. This is like Elvis is still alive. You know, Hitler is still alive. Boris Johnson is still alive. And we know these people are dead.
Even the Russian in question actually says, if you believe an official statement from Russian authorities, what can I say? Well, it's not a million miles from not believing a word of it. The annoying thing about this is there is not a shred of useful information. It's just, I know it wasn't shot down. Why? No, I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, at some point, you have to assume either Prigozhin never goes on flights that he's supposed to have gone on, or he was tipped off on this one and he sent a body. That's conceivable, I suppose. He was tipped off that this was going to be an assassination attempt.
And why would you, if you're his body double, go on this flight?
Would you mind awfully?
The thing that I was learning about Gettier problems in philosophy, where even if you are a massive idiot, you can sometimes get things right. So as much as I would love to poo-poo this, I'll probably be proved wrong because he'll have guessed it correctly somehow.
I mean, this happens quite a lot. I can't think of a single example where they ever have turned out to be still alive, have they? A lot of people said they disposed of bin Laden's remains with suspicious rapidity, but no sign of him since.
Can I talk about cancer again?
We have to go now. Sorry, Lewis. That's it for part 2. Join us after the break for sexual harassment in the classroom, sexual intolerance in Uganda, and sexual signalling in world chess. See you in a couple of minutes.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to our latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So we've had a fair few sunshine and showers across the UK today, and that's going to continue as we go through tonight. And this is all due to this low pressure that's bringing these occlusions southeastwards across the UK. But looking at the detail for tonight's weather, today's cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, bringing some heavy showers across the far southeast to start the early hours of Wednesday. But elsewhere, some clear spells, but also a few showers. But with light winds in those clear spells, temperatures will be dropping a little lower than what we saw last night. So a brighter start to Wednesday compared to Tuesday, with more in the way of sunshine around. A few showers already developing across the north and west. And throughout the morning, we'll see that cloud bubbling up, allowing further showers to develop. But these will be most heavy across the northern half of the UK. They'll still feel pretty pleasant in any lengthier sunny spells, especially across the southeast, where we could just creep into the low 20s. Let's have a look at Thursday's weather. Now, generally, it's going to be remaining dry and bright across the north and east. But this area of cloud and rain is going to move in from the southwest, and some of that could be quite heavy, especially along southern counties of England. But looking towards the end of the week and the start of September, it does look like things will start to settle down a little bit, with fewer showers and a bit more in the way of sunshine.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The
the Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, Steve, we'll kick off this section with the Telegraph, a study suggesting that hundreds of former pupils did, in fact, stand too close to him.
Yeah, let me do poo-poo part 2. So here's the story. Hundreds of former pupils accused teachers of sexual harassment, according to a study. It's the University of Greenwich. The study leads a lot to be desired in the way it was done. So they approached and contacted people over the age of 18 and said, anything ever go off when you were at school? And then people responded. And then they quote things like 75% respondents said, well, who's going to respond and say... In fact, here's the big question. Who are these 25% of people replying going, nah, mate?
Thank you for your inquiry. I'm pleased to reassure you that my school years were untroubled.
So it's pointless, isn't it? That using that side of it. Look, these stories are bad. They go from bad to icky. I mean, some of them are just a bit like, oh... rather than actual. I mean, here's one. A British woman aged between 18 and 24 recalled how a female deputy head at her school used to measure the length of the pupils' skirts and say that a certain length had to be reached out of respect for the male members of staff. I think the blokes in that school also deserve an apology. Going around casting aspersions about what they're like.
Yes, that's interesting. I mean, it's obviously going to be a spectrum from things that just seem a bit dated to us now, but probably well-intentioned, to obviously there is going to be some groping. You know, there have been historical sexual offences which have been overwhelming the courts and the police, you know, for ever since Savile, basically, now. So I know that, you know, that these things do happen. But it does feel, doesn't it, is it part of that whole category of things that we used to not bother about particularly, and now then we dig into it and we do surveys and we endlessly hand-wring about it? Is it making anyone happier or even better behaved?
You know what? It's just about being a victim. Were you a victim? If you ask somebody, were you a victim? And there might be money in it. People start thinking, are you a victim? Did bad things happen? I hate to say it, I'm with Steve on this. This is the most ridiculous study I've ever seen. What do they put it out on Facebook and they said, if you've been abused by your teacher, Let me know if you haven't. Let us know if you haven't been abused.
Does it feel like it maybe come out of a student body, like they had a meeting? Well, let's see how we do a survey. How do you do a survey?
It is the University of Greenwich, nothing personal.
Yeah, it's an online survey, isn't it?
Light on Ren.
But it is right to say, let's not do these things. We don't want to brush over this entirely and go like, oh, yeah, it always happened. Yeah, let's make it stop. But this survey does not help stop it.
Let's move on. Lewis, Ugandan news in The Guardian, a somewhat confusing application of a controversial new criminal code.
Well, this is scary too, which is Ugandan man charged with aggravated homosexuality under the new law. A 20-year-old guy could face the death penalty under anti-LGBTQ plus legislation introduced this year in Uganda, and it's a very Christian country. What it doesn't, I don't know what that means, because lots of countries are Christian and they don't do this. They're anti-gay. They don't want people to be gay.
Yeah.
And what are we? Are we going to interfere in? Maybe, you know.
Oh, I don't know that there's any indication we're going to interfere, but what I'm slightly puzzled about, I don't know if you understood it any better, Steve, unlawful sexual intercourse with a male adult aged 41. So there are two quite distinct possibilities here. One, they've rendered this sex illegal with their act, and now they're going to prosecute. Or they're talking about rape. Unlawful sexual because aggravated homosexuality does sound like there was some, but I don't know whether they're trying to pin that on him in order to make it seem more palatable to the international community. Or whether
well, when it comes to burglary, there's burglary and aggravated burglary, and that's if you use a weapon.
Right.
So, I mean, it depends on your definition.
I mean, I'm not saying it should be the death penalty even for rape, but it's considerably more, within range internationally than the death penalty simply for the act of gay sex.
Yeah, although when you read this thing, and maybe this is the Guardian spin on it, but it does look like this is a country outlawing the act, and maybe this is a case of extra detail, but they would still be outlawing this act regardless of the aggravation.
Yeah. My impression is there was an act, and I think, as opposed to maybe somebody expressing that they are homosexual, which is probably also illegal. They've actually had sex.
It's like the first and the second iteration of the Philip Schofield scandal, I suppose, isn't it?
They're right at the end of the story. Earlier this month, following a tip-off, police arrested 4 people, including 2 women in a massage parlour for allegedly engaging in same-sex activity. So that seems far more
I'm with Queen Victoria on that one, I have to say.
That one doesn't happen.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has accused the World Bank of trying to coerce the government to drop the controversial legislation. That's an interesting side to it as well, I suppose. The Daily Star now, Steve, and the only chess story that they've shown any interest in this century appears to have played itself out at last.
Yep, this is the Chess Star. It's ended the $100 million lawsuit after claims that he cheated by using what they now call vibrating AI anal beads. I remember when this story first broke and it was just
vibrating beads,
and now it's AI, apparently. It doesn't need to be, because the ZX Spectrum in the 80s could play chess. So I don't know why we need AI all over
I suppose the AI is off-site, isn't it? The AI is studying the game and then transmitting a message to the beads. The beads aren't doing it all in a situation. No.
We hope not, because imagine gaining intelligence and realising where you are.
It's just regular Bluetooth beads, aren't
they? Good old-fashioned. So, but then this is because he managed to beat the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So the question is, was Magnus a sore loser, or was Hans sore in other ways?
Yeah.
And I would be more impressed if this were true, because imagine trying to keep a straight face while you're going, I'm just going to move the knight. No, I'm not going to move there. I'm just going to move there. OK, give me back. I would pay to watch that version.
Well, it's a shame, because it doesn't look like it's ever going to come to light now. He's withdrawn the case and it's all over. Very great shame, but I can't imagine it's the last time that we will be seeing love beads used in inappropriate circumstances. Over to Lewis. The Telegraph.
I only use them in appropriate circumstances.
Plain dress.
Which I had them did any time you were going off script, veering towards the carnivore. A grim reminder, we shouldn't laugh of what a really brutal regime actually looks like, though obviously we do have to bear in mind all that sweet, sweet oil.
Do you know what? This is like a comedy program, and tonight's show is like a who's who of horrible things happening.
Isn't it?
Nuclear bombs and all sorts. Anyway, Saudi retired teacher sentenced to death for criticizing ruling family on social media. This is in the Telegraph, and typical of the British newspapers. It doesn't tell you exactly what he said.
No, well, I guess they don't want to repeat it. We know where that goes. But
right, because we're beholden to the Saudis. And so when the Saudis kill a lot of people every year, they're the third largest killer of people. And
after what, China and Iran, is it?
Yes.
I think, yeah.
And so it's just, this is another thing, more reason to say anybody in Saudi Arabia who is unhappy can say they have a risk of being
killed. And this
killed.
guy, I mean, and this is not to say that any other number of followers would have made it any more acceptable, but he has 9 social media followers.
Yeah, which is
9. I mean, virtually his
troll.
own family by the sound of it, you know, and it's just horrific. He's
it's still more than Louis Schaefer.
There is part of the story as well where his brother's in exile in London, I think, and saying that this is some sort of deeper plot to try and get to him. So either way, it's all bad, but who knows?
It's very, very bad. Hopefully Tony Blair, on his regular visits to the country, can
picking up money.
Them. Yeah. Steve, Telegraph, to finish this section, the Americans are getting loads of drone swarms to counter the Chinese military threat. Doesn't say where they're buying them from, of course.
US military to create, I suppose, huge autonomous drone swarms to counter China. These are not the kind of drones that you see in the park with the dad playing it and the kid totally bored, but the dad is still enjoying it more.
Right.
They will produce 1,000-strong swarms that they need to counter the advantage that China has in terms of the tech way of doing war. Look, I mean, war's bad and all that, but I'd rather it be fought by drones. If we could find a way that they fight other drones and just leave us out of it, I'd be all for that.
In fact, if you're going to do it by drones, though, you could just do it as a video game anyway, couldn't you?
That's true.
You know.
They'd probably still win. But Kathleen Hicks, the Deputy Defence Secretary in America, said the Replicator programme, that's what it's called, will have the ability to deploy thousands of drones at a time across land, sea and air. Well, mainly air, you'd imagine.
I would imagine air, underwater drones. That will do for part 2. Join us for part 3 with Mozart lullabies, alien artefacts and the joy of to-do lists, a cornucopia of trivia. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
all sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So The Independent now, Lewis, and it seems that music can be an effective painkiller, although in some cases also a reliable source thereof, I would say.
Yeah, well, this is what they say, and this is one of those, according to researchers' findings, suggest that if they play recorded music, Mozart in particular, before they jab newborn babies.
Before they do it, not to ease the pain afterwards.
No. So if they play for 20 minutes, recorded music, and then they jab the baby.
So it sort of numbs the foot beforehand.
Beforehand.
It's a very unexpected kind of outplay, isn't it?
It is. You know what it is? They're trying to do everything they can to, like, push Mozart, really.
Big Mozart.
I don't know, maybe this is done by Mozart's manager.
I do remember, though, actually, when our kids were young, or tiny, even in, still in utero, the number of nonsense like CDs around that you could play Baby Mozart and it would increase their IQ. People genuinely believe that.
Oh, I believed it. I bought the box set.
Yeah, and you like get the womb close up and
I was going to say, how'd you get the headphones up the... That's the trickiest part.
I mean, I think the funny thing is there's probably a tiny correlation because the kind of people who listen to Mozart are usually more intelligent than the kind of people who listen to... I'm not even going to say the name of any particular, but the more sort of thumping drum and bass stuff. And consequently, they have more intelligent babies, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's just because you listen to Mozart." That's be what it is. It's a more palatable.
Or maybe that rich people listen to Mozart.
Well,
and rich
people get rich because they're more intelligent.
No. Rich and richer people are always assumed to be more intelligent.
Yes.
There's a couple of things on this survey, though. I mean, even the way you just described it, then their analysis might be wrong. Maybe listening to Mozart is so bad that the kids are like, just do anything to take your mind off it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
But humans will do that, won't they, when they're bored?
Yeah.
They will see pain. That is done. Yeah, they will press buzzers,
Here was some guy looking at the baby to see how distressed it looked. They all were upset when they were jabbed, but straight after the Mozart ones got a bit better. This whole thing has the vibe of, if you want the radio on, Helen, just ask. You don't have to come up with all of this.
I do think Classic FM is essentially a middle-class sedative, though. I thought that for quite some time. Anyway, relax, Steve. You've been very patient, and now we have the only story I think you're probably interested in this evening. Alien technology found in Pacific Ocean.
Yep, they found some metallic spheres. This Harvard physicist, Avi Loeb, says that 100 of these tiny fragments found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean are from outside our solar system, and then all the coulds start coming in.
Yeah.
It could be... There's a bit where he's not ruled out that these are from an alien craft. Call me when you've ruled it in.
Yeah.
Because until then, these are just words, aren't they?
I've watched this evening, having seen it there, and it's not a brand new thing. He's been on this quest for a long time. There are some long-form interviews on YouTube if you want to see him discussing it quite seriously. He seems like an intelligent guy, and he's able to discuss the origins of metals in the various parts of exploding supernovae or whatever that create heavy metals. So he seems to have some sort of grasp of the subject matter. He's not like a complete freak.
He is. You know how you can tell the guy's an idiot?
Okay.
Would
it be an illuminated sign with his own name on it?
Harvard University. Anybody who goes to Harvard University is an idiot. Sorry.
Okay. Well, it might be worth it. If you find it interesting, as I say, follow it up on the YouTube discussions. But
it's not that shocking, by the way, if they are from outside our solar system. I listened to a podcast on space dust, and if you go on your roof, you will be able to...
When you were on space dust?
Yeah, space dust. I googled the wrong thing. Next thing, I listened to a podcast. But on any roof, there will be, within the billions of particles, you'll get a handful of particles that come from outside our solar system.
Oh, really?
So it's not that weird.
Okay.
It's just they're quite big enough.
I remember when there was a lot of weird yellow dust on our wheelie bins in Norfolk, my parents' house, and apparently it had come from the Gobi Desert, which I think in terms of, relative distance isn't surprising.
That's nothing. He's talking about far out of space.
I don't know, but if you think about it, like the Gobi Desert, it's got a lot more awkward aerospace.
The guy says it's not from our solar system, and that's rare. But the truth is that our solar system is one tiny little place, and we're surrounded by the whole universe.
Also, just to ruin it, everything in our solar system is from outside our solar system originally.
Yes, that's true. Yes. It used to be all fields. Lewis, Telegraph now, and according to a lady doctor on Woman's Hour, I want to emphasise, to-do lists a little more than passive-aggressive weapons in the battle of the sexes.
Yeah, well, women are horrible. And let me just say that women like to make up lists so partners appreciate their work. This woman is writing a book on Listful, and she gets on BBC's Radio 4 Women's Hour, which is state propaganda. With the BBC is, and it should be put out of business. State propaganda. Maybe if you like it, keep it. Anyway, here is a woman who says that women like lists because it shows the man how much they're doing around the house. And here is a woman, this poor Joanna Nolan, Dr. Joanna Nolan, who is a woman in a very bad marriage, and she's got to basically win the love of her husband by
Do you think, though, do you think if that is what they are, and I think there is a tiny hint of truth to that, and women do, well, my wife does enjoy telling me about all the small things she's done during the course of the day, on the understanding that I might otherwise underestimate her contribution to the smooth running of the household. Still, I think that is forgivable, possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, why? Why would it be forgivable?
Well, because it is possible to underestimate how much people do during the course of the day. And if you go to work from like 9 till 5, you bring home a paycheck, it doesn't really matter. You can say, I sat in the office all day twiddling my thumbs. Here is the contribution to the joint account that I promised. You know,
maybe
cares,
a clean kitchen is the contribution to the good.
Exactly. I can understand what you're saying about the intention might be good, but I think the delivery would be terrible. I don't think there's a single relationship where a woman's gone, look at this that I did today, and the bloke's gone, oh, hang on, and
one
really
last
paid attention
story.
to it.
We can have got 30 seconds, Lewis, for the Mirror, the possible evidence of the missing link in Turkey for our last story.
Well, his family walks on all fours. Shouldn't exist in Turkey, shouldn't exist, but it's a missing link between man and ape, which it isn't. It's just a family of 6 that have been told to get on your knees because every time they come, they take pictures, and we probably get some money.
Here they go.
For having the pictures of it.
They have a strange back shape, though, presumably, don't they?
I don't think
that long enough, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think they look that
It's quite majestic.
It's been slowed down like a music video, surely.
Show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail have not a penny to compensate air chaos victims. The Metro have an £80 million bill for air IT fiasco, but none of it going to the customers. Guardian, Britain must take China's human rights abuses seriously, say MPs. Express, PM how Brexit freedoms will ditch EU rule to build homes. The iNews, UK airlines accused of abandoning passengers. And finally, the Daily Star, boffins say beer goggles don't work. Those were your front pages. It's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Lewis and Steve. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m. Andrew Doyle with Leo Kearse and Stephen Allen. Again, if you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you and good night.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So we've had a fair few sunshine and showers across the UK today, and that's going to continue as we go through tonight. And this is all due to this low pressure that's bringing these occlusions southeastwards across the UK. But looking at the detail for tonight's weather, today's cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, bringing some heavy showers across the far southeast to start the early hours of Wednesday. But elsewhere, some clear spells, but also a few showers. But with light winds in those clear spells, temperatures will be dropping a little lower than what we saw last night. So a brighter start to Wednesday compared to Tuesday, with more in the way of sunshine around. A few showers already developing across the north and west. And throughout the morning, we'll see that cloud bubbling up, allowing further showers to develop. But these will be most heavy across the northern half of the UK. They'll still feel pretty pleasant in any lengthier sunny spells, especially across the southeast, where we could just creep into the low 20s. Let's have a look at Thursday's weather. Now, generally, it's going to be remaining dry and bright across the north and east. But this area of cloud and rain is going to move in from the southwest, and some of that could be quite heavy, especially along southern counties of England. But looking towards the end of the week and the start of September, it does look like things will start to settle down a little bit, with fewer showers and a bit more in the way of sunshine.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It is the furthest point from central London where the ULEZ cameras are being placed. There is considerable local anger. There is a disconnect between central London and outer London. But don't think this is just London. These schemes are coming to every town and city in this country unless we can stop them. So join me for this live show over the course of the next hour. You'll hear all of the arguments. I will attempt to dismantle some of what I think are Sadiq Khan's outright lies and cod science. But first, let's get the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Breaking news first. A police officer who was hit by a train last week has died. 46-year-old Sergeant Graham Saville was trying to save a distressed man on the railway tracks in Balderton. Flags across the Nottinghamshire police force will now be flown at half-mast as a mark of respect. Nottinghamshire Chief Constable Kate Maynell says his service and sacrifice will never be forgotten. The Mayor of London says he's sorry for anyone who's suffering adverse consequences because of his policies. Speaking to GB News, Sadiq Khan said the expanded ULEZ policy is essential to protect the health of people living in the capital.
Listen, I'm always sorry for anybody who's suffering adverse consequences because of our policies, but at the same time, I've got to be honest with people and say I've been meeting bereaved mums who's lost their children because of air pollution. I've been meeting a paediatrician today who works with mums who are pregnant, suffering the ill consequences because of air pollution, and babies who are born suffering the ill consequences. I've met today a doctor who runs an asthma clinic, but also I visited Great Ormond Street, the inpatient ward at the Children's Evelina Hospital. I met scientists, health practitioners and others. That's why I'm angry that the government's letting down London and the South East.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the Mayor's decision is in poor taste.
People and families are struggling with the cost of living. That's obvious to everyone. And at that time, the Labour Party, the Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer are introducing the ULEZ charge, which is going to hit working families. I don't think that's the right priority. I don't think that's the right thing to do, and I wish they had not done it.
GB News can reveal at least 20,000 people have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Official Home Office figures show that up until yesterday, 19,800 migrants had arrived in small boats. However, GB sources reveal up to 300 migrants being brought into Dover Harbour on Border Force vessels today brings that total so far this year to over 20,000. It's understood they crossed the Channel in at least 6 dinghies. That comes as the government insists it's stopping the boats. And finally, tens of thousands of airline passengers have seen their flights cancelled today due to the knock-on effects of an air traffic control fault. Analysis of flight data shows at least 281 flights have been cancelled at the UK's 6 busiest airports, with Gatwick and Heathrow worst hit. The Transport Secretary told GB News an independent review will take place into how the technical problem began. Mark Harper also says he's in touch with the airlines. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nigel.
Well, we are here, literally on the outermost limits of what is now Greater London. It used to be Kent County Council. ULEZ is driving people absolutely mad. They're finding any way they possibly can to avoid paying the charge. And some of them resorting to means that I would never previously have thought of. In fact, here comes George, the former landlord of the Blacksmith's Arms. Turn it off. George, is this your means of avoiding paying £12.50?
Of course. I mean, otherwise it's going to cost me £24 to come down to my local and have a couple of pints. You know?
And what about, I mean, I guess if it's going to cost you £12.50 to come for a pint, it's the same to go to the doctors, the same to go shopping, isn't it?
Same to go here, same to go to the church, same to go to the cemetery, same to pick up a prescription. They do me in all ways.
Is this compliant, George?
Well, I don't know, it could be. Maybe necessity's the mother of invention. We'll sort something out.
Well said, George. I'm now going to show you a short package of this area and what a beautiful part of England it is, and I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes' time. George, thank you.
Pleasure.
This is the furthest point from central London that is considered Greater London Authority. I've got an air monitor here, so we're 4.2 now. Go onto the London Underground and it goes through the roof. If we're worried about the health of Londoners, maybe it's the Underground that needs sorting. So this is exceptionally good. Air quality, not an issue here. This is a rural area. There are actually, in the villages here, more horses than there are people. And I have lived in this area all my life. I've never known an issue upset people as much as this